employees. So that'll be something that we talk about as far as investments, and what does it mean? And some of these companies, BP, Chevron, et cetera, do have the reserves as far as cash flow that they could be transitioning, and investors like myself are watching them and wondering why they're not transitioning quicker, both because we think about people and planet. So I'm just going to start sharing some slides, and let's see if I can do this. It should be easy. Okay. Okay, are you able to see this? Let's see. Rachel,
we can see
you tell me, can you all see? I'm not able to see it. You are? Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, great. All right. So my firm is called NIA. And does it say loading on yours? Or can you see our NIA sign? Okay, well.
No, it says loading.
Shoot. Okay, well, hopefully it's going to move quickly. I don't, we'll see. So my firm is named NIA, and NIA is a Swahili word for intention and purpose. And so really investing with intention and purpose into the economy that we need to see. And so what does that mean for us? We are investing at the intersection of environmental sustainability and social justice. And some of the ways we're doing that, I just put some of the things we're involved with down here at the bottom of the slide. So we are Gender Equity Now certified. And what that means is that we've gone through a process, certification process that took us about 8 months, where we looked at every practice within our own firm on what leads to gender equality. So, of course, what are our hiring practices? What are our recruitment practices? And as well as promotions, retentions, do we have a pay gap? And we learned all sorts of really interesting facts from the research. So one I'll just share, because this is now a way that we look at the companies we invest in. Everything from, do you have a pay gap, to how transparent are you when you're hiring? So it turns out that women are much more likely to move forward in a job application process if they know a little bit about who else is applying. That's an easy thing to do, to be transparent. We were already doing that because a lot of our practices, we have a Zoom interview where we have all of our candidates on it. So they were able to see. And so that turns out that is a practice where women feel safer advancing. Another fact that was funny for us and maybe interesting to you is that the minute you assign points to office tasks, such as making the coffee or planning the CEO birthday party or planning the summer picnic, guess who signs up to do those tasks? The men. And then women can actually stay at desks and get things done. And if there's no credit given for the quote unquote house jobs of the office, then the women end up doing extra work without being compensated for that. So just all sorts of different things that now we look at companies and say, oh, okay, well, how gender equal are they? And why is that important in investing? Because the research is really saying that diverse teams are more innovative. The research also says that diverse teams make better decisions up to 87% of the time, and particularly in crisis time. And so as we move through a climate crisis, as we move through this pandemic, we're noticing in the companies in which we invest, those that have diverse teams are actually doing better. And so that's been a really important way for us to think about which companies to choose. We're also B Corp certified, and that is a growing movement of business on purpose. And how can we profit from the very purpose that we're trying to achieve? And that's also a lens that we look at our companies. And so one of the things that I encourage for this group is just to be open-minded about how we're choosing our companies, because in our country, we really have grown to the index fund, and almost every advisor to this day is using the index fund, which was developed in the 1970s, kind of popularized in the 80s, and then kind of became ubiquitous in the 90s. And for the most part, that is, say, the S&P 500 is probably our most familiar, the 500 largest companies in the US, that hides behind a ticker symbol of SPY. And why I say it's hiding is because it's not transparent what those 500 companies are. And it's really hard for us to know what we're investing in and what we own when there's 500 companies. Now, moving on to the Russell 3000, or the MSCI ACWI, which is 8,000 companies. Not only can we as investors it's not possible for us to know all those companies, it's not possible for our advisors to know either. So when we're choosing companies based on an index, we're often investing into some great companies, some really mediocre companies, and some poor companies. So our job at NIA, we're trying to pull people away from the index and really build portfolios that are solutions forward. And we look at the revenues. And so that's why I mentioned a B Corp, is that we're baked with purpose, and we look at companies first at what is their revenue source and what are their products and services, and are they needed across our 6 solution themes. And I'll get to what our solution themes are and how we think about that. And then the final symbol on this is that we are part of We the Change, and Nia is a We the Change founder. And what that is those are the women CEOs of the B Corp movement, and we're about 10%. And I anticipate that'll grow. We're really trying to have more, and yet women-led businesses are so few and far between. They're not getting the funding from the very small businesses all the way up to the large businesses. And so that is also something we think about when investing into our economy. So I'll go to the next one. This is a bullseye. And when I sit down with clients, we often start with a bullseye, and then we do something that's called opening the envelopes. And now things are online and you can open up an email, and yet sometimes things are still arriving in paper statements. And so really just figuring out, opening up to say, what do we own? And is it aligned with where we want to go? And so we put your mission statement or your goals right in the center. And then we have a post-it for each of your investments, and we just measure and say, okay, is this investment, is this company really achieving what do I want to achieve? And so today we're talking about environmental sustainability. So I have one client we just did this with who's really interested in rainforests. And so we were able to say, okay, is this actually improving the longevity and the resources within rainforests, or is it causing harm? And lots of companies fall right in between, and they're not really causing harm. They're not really directly impacting the rainforest. And so this kind of gives us a heat map about deciding what changes we want to make in a portfolio, right? So and Chevron's an easy company to pick on when we're talking about rainforests. So, no offense to anybody that's involved with Chevron, but if you're really focused on the rainforest, Chevron has been pretty detrimental as far as spills, particularly in Ecuador, as well as Venezuela and Brazil. And so you might say that's detracting from your mission, and that might be a heated one that you want to get rid of. Whereas one we just did last week, this family was quite heavily invested in a headhunting company. So just a matchmaker, from small companies to large companies, doing a hiring process, recruiting CEOs or the next board member. And so we decided that they were fine to keep that because it wasn't harming their main goal, which was the rainforest. We did start to check in and say, well, is this company thinking about women and people of color in the pipeline? And then that served for a way for them to say, oh, I'm going to ask that question, and I'm going to get more clarity on what that company's doing as far as my goals for diversity. Even though diversity wasn't their primary goal, it kind of started this conversation. So this is just one way to start thinking about what are the things you own, and are they really addressing your mission and your goals? Okay. So at NIA, we have a few pretty significant goals. They're along different levels. So, and I offer them because this might be a way for you to think about your own investments. So we are looking for those companies that are showing leadership. We want to prove to the corporate world that it's entirely possible to generate profits while also contributing to the betterment of society. And what we've seen, particularly in this last year, that those companies that were working on purpose really did were able to show that their innovation had outsized returns. Particularly, when we're thinking about our healthcare crisis, but also when we're thinking about what is needed for planet as far as renewable energy. And that's been really important. We do invest across wind, solar, and waves. Waves, not a technology that's really in the public markets yet, so we're watching that more. So most of what we see these days is somewhere in the solar or the wind, and then also in energy efficiencies. So lighting, things like that, that for efficiencies of buildings. Okay, the next one is innovation, and we're looking for high impact innovation. And what are the companies that are either innovating themselves or doing some strategic mergers and acquisitions so that they're really getting access? And that might be in a biotech, in a small biotech that's really working with a pharmacy company, particularly for the development of a vaccine. We saw that in Moderna. We've also seen it in some of our larger companies. And then, of course, we're looking for positive returns. And we're really looking for that combination of the solutions focused with the inclusive management and the diverse teams. And that's where we're seeing we can find the best returns. And then finally, we're looking to really seed and share with investors what they can do so that they can really be part of this movement as we move forward, and that individuals can feel that they are investing for the solutions and winning. So our solutions themes we developed in 2012. And I mention that because I'll show a next slide with the UN Sustainable Development Goals that were developed in 2013. And I can tell that even though we weren't at the same table doing this, we really had the same systems thinking. And it's really a principle of what is needed, what is the end picture that we want, and then backing into what is that going to look like as far as investments in our economy. So we know we need a sustainable planet. We know that some of the practices that our corporations have been engaging in are not sustainable and in fact can be harmful. We know we need affordable, green, eco, and community housing. That I have to say is harder to find in public markets. I'm sorry to say that. And yet that is a theme that's needed. So we keep it as one of our solution themes. We know we need affordable and eco transportation. That is particularly hard during COVID times when we're so interested in what does public transportation mean, particularly for moving things, people, when we're talking about food, getting our food supply where it needs to go, and as well as getting our people. Now, of course, many of us are not commuting during these times. And because of COVID, there's been a drive into single user cars again. So we're really focusing on the electric vehicle space for that right now. And we're always interested in trains. Because of their environmental imprint, and then the ability to move people and things at a lower cost, both to people and to planet. Natural and organic foods, super important. And as we've seen in the last year, how are we going to grow what we need for all of the people on the planet? And then how are we going to get them that food? And then how can we be thinking about soil health and what is regenerative? So which are the companies that are really thinking about all of these together? And that may be that they're not using pesticides. It might be that they're using permaculture concepts. It might be that they're growing healthier things such as some of our darker green vegetables. So those are different ways we think about it. Healthcare, super obvious. The ways where we really think about healthcare are women, because that's been under-researched and underdeveloped as far as some of the diseases that affect women. And then we also think about people of color, because again, those are some areas that have not happened globally. So sickle cell that affects the African-American community, also viruses. So Rachel knows this. I don't know if Rachel knows this. Actually, Brett knows this. I grew up in the 80s in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my first W-2 was at a florist shop. So I really grew up in the gay community. And really what was for me my first pandemic. And so growing up with HIV and AIDS and having people in my community so affected by that has really led me to think about and care about what are those diseases that are underlooked and or overlooked. And so that has led us really into this space of viruses. And so that really prepared us well for what we're going through right now as far as preventions, vaccines, and then also remedies to the extent that we're going to find a cure. So those are the things that we're looking at there as far as healthcare. And then also, of course, the women's diseases as well. And then our final investment thesis is really looking at, and this gets woven in a little bit, but to me, it's education. And so, as Rachel let you know, I have a deep background in education. I was a classroom teacher for a long time before I was a portfolio manager. And so I really bring all of that into knowing that empowering our people, empowering investors, empowering employees is going to be a really part of the solution. How can we do that through communication? And how can we do that through financial inclusion? So really looking at that. And so I'll show you some examples of ways that we think about that. And you can think about that in your own portfolios. As I mentioned, what we're doing really lines up so well with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I'll show this, our portfolio with this next slide, is we're actually addressing all 17 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, some of them easier to address than others, particularly, as I mentioned, in public equities. How can we be thinking about gender equity? How can we be thinking about sustainable planet? Some of them much easier. Life underwater. We do have a few companies, one actually that's working on collecting plastics from the oceans and using that to make sustainable packaging. So we have a few companies that are thinking about that. We have a water company that's really careful about building pipelines and infrastructure, particularly when it comes to addressing hurricanes, which I know is important in your area. So at any rate, we're proud of the portfolio, and we do see that to the extent they can each be addressing some of these solutions, that's what we're looking for in a company. And we'll go to this next one. My slides are not advancing. Oh, here we go. Wait a minute. There was one more. Wait. Oh, okay. Here we go. Sorry about that. What does it look like? What would this look like on a fact sheet? So just sharing a little bit about, this is what our portfolio looked like in December. And so we are global, and a lot of the companies are easier to find in the US. That doesn't mean that across the globe, there aren't solutions everywhere. Because of some of the requirements of banks like Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, we're required to use what's called ADRs. And that means that there's no currency hedging. So all of our companies, even though they're global, they're listed on one of the exchanges, whether it's a NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. So they're really easy to find here. And then you can see that innovation comes across cap sizes. So we're actually a little bit less large cap. When I first started to build this portfolio, I really was thinking it was going to have to be mostly small cap companies that were showing innovation. And as we've been doing this is my 7th year with this particular portfolio. Well, a lot of the companies we invested in the beginning have grown and keep growing. So that's been interesting to see some of these solutions focused companies actually enter the S&P. But then also, we're seeing that innovation, particularly when it comes to environmental sustainability, has become a theme and a focus outside of our work. It's kind of, we're getting some tailwinds, I would say, as we move through that. I'll just do this last slide. Oh no, there's actually one more. So this is us, we're changing the face of finance. And I mentioned this just because some of the statistics are kind of crazy. And when I started this, I'm out in Oakland, California. And I really thought all of the asset managers, the cool female asset managers, were in Boston or New York, because that seems like where our finance industry is. And it turns out there are just so few of us. So in asset managers, between women and people of color combined, we make up 1.3% of the managers out there. And so our firm is working to welcome in more women and more people of color into this industry, because we do think that there's more room at the table and that our economy will do well when we have it more balanced. So that's something we're working on. And then here's just a few samples of what could companies be in the public markets that we're seeing. So First Solar is one of the best when it comes to industrial solar. So we have others that are working on residential. First Solar is really going global with the very best. And what's interesting to me about them is they their panels stand up to the most heat. And as our planet heats up, the longevity and the use of the solar panels is going to be really important. So to see projects across Peru, Argentina, the US, etc., that's been a really important player for us. Vestas is a Danish wind company, and they make some of the best turbines, and really love to see their work. One of the things that they do that's interesting to us is they are sponsors of the Hawthorne Network. And the Hawthorne Network is basically a club where the cool women in renewable energy hang out. And they sponsor that. They do a lot of recruitment from there. And so really bringing in women into an industry that really hadn't been female focused before has been interesting. And the fact that they're Danish. Now, the Danes love this company. They just don't want any windmills in their view of the sea. So that's been fascinating to me too, is that they have a love-hate, and nobody really wants any of this in their backyard, and yet they really know how important it is. For us, we watch where Vestas is making government contracts, because what we're also seeing is that some of the windier places on the globe are also where we have pushed some of our native communities. So whether it's in the US, in Iowa, or whether it's in northern Kenya, that's quite windy, great place for windmills, and yet who is living there and how will that affect communities? And so we're watching them navigate that, hopefully really well. Etsy has been a really interesting one because 87% of their sellers are women. They were stay-at-home moms often before the COVID. And so now how can we keep their businesses going and strengthen their businesses during this time? Etsy was actually a B Corp, a benefit corporation before they went public. And so they've kept a lot of those same profit from purpose and helping each of their companies that they support profit from purpose. So thinking about sustainable packaging, thinking about client relationships, and how do they do the very best with their customers. So that's been really interesting for us because they are incubating and supporting all of these small businesses, basically across the world right now. And then Square is, when you go to the farmer's market, every small business, how can we have financial inclusion so you don't have to have a huge cash register or any of the infrastructure that a larger company would have? How can small individuals get into the economy? And one thing that Square's been doing too is that they, during COVID, really innovated as far as participating in the PPP program and really getting most of their sellers to get signed up and have easier access when they maybe weren't getting approvals through their own banks. So we've liked how they've really stepped up their financial inclusion, particularly to support small businesses. And then the last one on here is United Natural Foods. And what we're watching about them is they really have been known for being kind of the one-stop trucking for United Natural Foods. So really heavy on organics, and which has been great. What their trucking industries, we're really pushing with them to become more sustainable. How could their transportation and the way they're transporting all of these delicious foods be more sustainable? The other thing we're watching with them and in conversation with this company about is which brands are they giving truck space to? And so the feedback we've gotten is that women and people of color businesses are often smaller and have a harder time negotiating for shelf space in your grocery stores as well as truck space in the shipping. And so can they be more conscious about who they're actually letting on their trucks at what kinds of deals? So those are different types of companies. I'll mention that there's no perfect company. I don't need to tell anyone, on the screen that, and that all companies have room for improvement, whether it's on sustainability or even our leaders. And then also when it comes to diversity and leadership. So we do have relationships and build relationships with every single one of our companies and help urge them along this path. If that's not moving as quickly as we would like to see, we then do kind of up the ante with a shareholder engagement that looks like a shareholder resolution that can end up on a proxy statement. And then we do encourage everyone to vote their proxies because we do see that being an owner owning a stock, there's a right and a responsibility to vote your proxies so that you can be voting into and investing into the world that you want, that we all want to see. So I'm going to stop there. I'll stop sharing my screen and just, I've said a lot, and we'll just see what's come up and what's interesting. Are there comments, questions, thoughts?
And you can just unmute yourself and ask a question if you have, or comment.
Yeah, hi. I did a quick search let me do this so that I don't look like this. I did a quick search on NIA. It says there's $100,000 as your investment point. Is that correct?
There's most platforms right now have $100,000 minimum. There's one platform called Folio that will take us for 10,000. And the good news is we are in the process of launching the mutual fund. So once we have that launched, we will be available for $1,000. And we're so excited about that. So fingers crossed and SEC willing, that will happen in May of this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Say
and
again the name of the $10,000 one?
Excuse me? Oh, it's called Folio, Folio, Folio Institutional. And I'll just put my email in the chat, or I'm guessing that Rachel can give it to you too, but I'll just put it in here in case I can answer any questions.
So you're not you're a brokerage then, essentially. I don't really know. If you're not a mutual fund.
Right? Yeah. So we're not a brokerage. So the brokerages are like Schwab or Fidelity or TD Ameritrade or, Merrill Lynch. And so we have what's called a portfolio that can be custodied at any of those places. They just all have their requirements for us. And so that they set the minimums there. Once you have a mutual fund, it's this whole other ball game where we get to set our own minimums, which is pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Amy, did you have a question or comment? I saw you talking, but your mute was on. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about sustainable investment or how you find, okay, I'll ask, how do you find these companies that are doing the sustainable work? What method do you use to find these?
Okay, so that's a great question. And I mention it because as this becomes a thing and as sustainability becomes more popular, there's a lot of regular kind of traditional asset management firms that have a large marketing budget and are jumping on the train. And so they're taking their regular index and kind of cleaning it up a little bit. And what they might be doing is taking out some of maybe the fossil fuel players. Why that's dangerous or scary to me is that they're not doing a full analysis of what's left. And they're not looking at, for example, our banking. Some of our largest banks are also the largest lenders to international pipeline projects and fossil fuel projects. And so there's quite a bit of risk on their business projects as both the US and the US is a little bit behind, that Europe's already done this, is really moved towards renewables. So to the extent that some of these other companies are still involved in what we call the incumbent economy, activities, there can be a lot of risk. So I would say that's the main way a lot of these greener or quote unquote sustainable portfolios are being constructed. And when I deconstruct that, I see a lot of risk. So what we're doing, which is a little bit different, is we go one company at a time across our 6 solution themes that I shared with you. So we actually cap our portfolio at 50 companies. And there's a few reasons for that. One is we can invest across our 6 solution themes across different sectors in the economy and different parts of the globe. So we're quite well diversified, and yet we know every single company and we know what they're up to. We're able to be in conversation with them and really watch their balance sheets and watch them really carefully. So we reduce a lot of risk by really knowing what we own. And so it's a different construction process. And I mentioned the indexing has become so popular. Most firms are starting with that index and then seeing how they can green it up, rather than starting with what is the end in mind, what is an investment thesis, and how can we build a portfolio to that way. So there's definitely going to be different styles to doing this, and ours is a little bit I'm going to say it's more careful. I wouldn't, if there's someone else on the screen would probably think they're being really careful too. There's also just, women think about this economy differently. And I'll just mention that with no offense to the beautiful men on the call, the economy was really created by men in constructs that work for them. So size is really important. So the S&P, the largest 500 companies, is our most important index. Women, we know that size doesn't matter. We want to know, can you get the job done? Is this the right job to be doing? What are the products and services, and what will that look like? And so we know that this innovation can come across different sizes. And so I'm hoping that we'll move to a place where we can leave some of those constructs behind and really just invest into what matters.
Chris, I have to say that was really just brilliant what you just said. So that's a female concept, but it is pretty brilliant. My question goes to, since portfolios are the product of brokerage firms, right? Am I right? I guess.
Oh yeah. Oh, with the vocabulary, you got it. You nailed that. Yes.
Well, I guess. I don't know. I know very little about investing. The reason I'm interested in this is for multiple reasons. And it's what you just said, that women have different interests, and why we want to change the world, why we think things should be better, why we need difference. My friend who, and I hate to take up all y'all's time, but I want to just throw this out there. My question is, what are the factors that don't portfolios need brokerage firms to pick them up for them to become bigger, better?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sector dominating kind of things.
Yeah, that's been an eye opener for me. I created this because I saw that it was missing from what was out there. And I said, wow, there's just nothing that really appeals to women. And I spent 2 years searching in the public markets to see, and I didn't see anything. So I said, oh, damn, I guess it's me. So I created this just kind of as a gift to the world.
That's
just like,
brilliant.
So thank you. But then it turns out that our economy is really so ripe to be disrupted, and yet it really doesn't want to be disrupted. And so getting on each of these brokerage houses and getting available and being able to lower our minimums, it's actually quite a heavy lift. And the big banks have their own products. So they don't really, so they set a higher criteria for us to be able to participate. So we're getting there though. It's been a lot of years. Our returns are remarkable. And so we're getting known. And so I will say to each of you, the economy and our investment industry does change by client request and client demand. So while I can't just make a product and put it out there, you each can ask your investment advisors, hey, what is more sustainable out there? What, have you looked at this? Can you look at NIA and show me 3 other things to look at too? And so each one of your voices can make a big difference as we move forward. I also want to just mention about women being left out a little bit, because it turns out it's just the air that we breathe, is that it turns into these conversations that are really led by men. And so most people learn about investing really at the dinner table, probably from family, and women aren't often included in those conversations. And it's not really a malevolent thing. I think it's kind of something that maybe just men ought to take care of this, and honey, you just sit down and you go do what you're doing. It's so, and that's not across the board. And yet so many people come to me and they have a kind of a layer of shame that they don't know about their investing. And what I know is that there's only 11 states that require any kind of financial literacy component to graduate from high school. California is not one of them. I don't know about Louisiana. New York's not one of them. So you graduate from high school and then you might go on to your career, or you might go on to college where you again don't learn about managing or investing. And then you go into your career and there might be a 401k that's offered to you, but the person who can tell you about it can only come Thursday afternoons, and you have a meeting at that time. So you never end up really meeting with that person. So at any rate, it's not front and center, this investing thing. And men just kind of jump in, learn the vocabulary, and then also they talk about it on the sports fields. Men talk about this, women don't talk about it. So then we don't even have the vocabulary. So I mention it because part of what we're trying to do at NIA is just kind of break away any kind of shame that we might have. I know, I mean, just a couple examples here, I can't do heart surgery. I don't know how to do that. I didn't go to school for it. I didn't train for that. And it doesn't keep me up at night. If I need that, or if a loved one needs that, I'm going to go to the expert because they went to school for that and they're going to do that. Same thing with architecture. I have no idea how to build a skyscraper, and it doesn't keep me up at night that I don't know how to do that. Whereas a lot of us don't know about our investing. We never went to school for that. No one taught us that. And somehow we have this layer of shame that we don't know. So let's just leave that on this screen today. Let's just leave any notion that there should be shame around not knowing this super complicated vocabulary that wasn't even created for us and no one taught us. So there's no dumb questions. And if anything comes of this conversation, I hope that you'll continue the conversation amongst yourselves, maybe with family, maybe with your advisor, but getting women talking about investing, I think is going to be part of the solution as well, because then we'll bring in our values. Women are so quick to connect the dots between what we want for our world and where our money is. We don't separate out these things. We're just, as far as stereotypes go, that's something that's awesome about women, is we're really clear on our values. And when offered the opportunity to invest your money with your values, we go, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's going to happen, So I do have a lot of faith and hope in women kind of rising up to make this happen.
Okay, so can I ask one more question in that vein? It's really frustrating to deal with my female financial advisor, Franklin Templeton person, who has invested me in mutual funds that are doing really well. She's not interested in me telling her that I'd like to be invested in things that suit my desires for world change, for changing the environment or food industry or transportation, and any of those things you just mentioned. So how is it if you take a portfolio that you have that's doing well, and I'm invested in fossil fuel, I know I am, I'm invested in other things that I would like to see wither away and die and be replaced by more sustainable things. So
okay, so that's really, you have an interesting situation. This is as far as a case study, because
it's really interesting because I'm pushing her, and she now has taken actual political stand against me. Literally called me a communist and closed the door in my face. And I'm like, what? You are my financial advisor.
Okay, so I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened.
And that's why I'm listening to this. It's like really big.
So I did start sketching out an article for how to know it's time to break up with your financial advisor. And the advice I got was, don't put that out there because we're about to launch this mutual fund and we need all advisors to really like us. And I can't start alienating them now.
Right.
However, on this call, I can tell you that I mean, in addition to being really supportive of your goals, they really need to listen and appreciate your goals, and they're getting paid to align your money with your goals. And I want you to feel so supported in your relationship. And I also might compare some, like you might be doing fine. I do know that the portfolios without fossil fuels have done better. So, there might be like a family history about why you're with her, or there might be, but if not,
there's history from why I'm with her, and I want to move away, but I don't want to lose anything financially. That's the trick for me here. It's like, how do
yeah.
you balance that thing of, and it's not like I have a lot of money invested. It is literally my lifetime nest egg. So
Okay, so there is a pretty significant myth out there that trying to overcome, that you cannot do well by doing good, and it really is a myth. And so some financial advisors really like to hold on to that. And yet we saw during COVID times that those companies that treated their employees well had much more loyalty. When everyone moved to working from home, they actually worked, whereas the others that hadn't treated their employees that well didn't have the loyalty, kind of lost when it was time to do more innovation and pivoting through tough times. They didn't have the buy-in. Those that have an environmentally sustainable or more friendly to the environment business plan right now are saving costs, not only in their own business plan, but when they go to do more innovation, they have a lower cost of capital because they're seen as a solid business. So they're going to be able to get loans and investment at better rates. So as we move forward, now these are things I'm guessing your advisor is not really interested in or might push back on. So
it really kind of, for in this instance, I hate to monopolize this, you guys. I know I'm monopolizing it a little bit. In this instance, she really is so more focused on her personal financial picture with regard to anyone else, because she is heavily invested in real estate and other stuff. She's suffering, and she's blaming the political landscape for that. And so it's complicated. It's just too complicated for her. So yeah, while she does kind of agree, there's that mindset with people who call themselves conservatives, and I'm talking out of my head here, but these are the people who drive 3 automobiles and have 2 houses, and they're not really keyed in on middle class America and sustainability issues. So it's tricky stuff.
okay, we are vetting financial planners at our firm so that we can have people to recommend to, and we don't have that list yet. I'd be happy to share that list when I have it, when we come up with it.
Right.
And now that we're in this virtual world anyway, it almost doesn't matter. Before, a high criteria for people was I want them in my neighborhood so I can have those in-person meetings. That may still be important to you, although we'll see. I just want to say that I threw into the chat just a couple things. These are not NIA products, and yet they're very popular when it comes to sustainability. So CRACS, that is a mutual fund, and it's community capital management, and they do really interesting loans. It's a very fixed income, so it's quite safe, and they're doing loans into communities for sustainability. And that is a mutual fund, so you can buy in or out of it at very low cost. I'm guessing it's, I don't have the numbers up in front of me. It's either $1,000 or $2,000. And you can look up what the interest rate is, but it's about 3 to 4%. So you're not going to be exposed to the market up and down volatility. So you're not exposed to that much growth, and yet it's very, very safe and meaningful. The other one is called My C Note. And that is a women-led firm. There's no minimum there. You could throw in $20, for your grandkids or yourselves. They are investing across the nation in CDFIs, and those are your local community banks that are making loans to small businesses. And you can choose, depending on how long you want to leave it in, whether it's going to women-led businesses or your local businesses. And so they have a couple of products. One is a 90-day liquidity, like kind of like a CD in a bank. A lot of our clients use C Note, and we love them. So those are two things to check out and run by your financial advisor and see if those are interesting. And of course, I will share the news about the NIA mutual fund when we have it. And just, I don't really need to share our returns all the time with everybody, but just in case your advisor is needing to know that this type of investing works, I will just show a screen of, let's see if I can get this over here. Let's see if this works, if it's helpful, and I can actually send it to you too. But sometimes I would also say, sometimes you can work with your advisor and you can kind of coax them along. Yours, I just have to say, sounds a little bit on the extreme, and that it doesn't sound like it's going to be worth a lot of conversations, and that you've already tried, so my hope is that everyone has someone they can go to where they feel really seen, where they feel supported, where they feel that they're learning something, and that they're not distanced by acronyms or vocabulary, that someone is really slowing down to meet you where you're at and really take you where you want to go. That's my hope for each of you. I can't find that slide right now, but I'm happy to send it. Our returns are remarkable, and this type of investing is going to be more and more important as we move forward. And I'm not trying to sell you on NIA, but more trying on this way of really thinking about people and planet, as opposed to size or numbers or 3,000 companies.
Do we have any other questions or comments from anyone?
Yeah,
Well,
I could say that Fidelity, which is very big, sends out a lot of educational information. And they have just this past week sent out information on sustainable investing, whether it's environmental, whether it's gender oriented, whether it's social justice oriented. And so I believe that without even logging in or being a part of anything, you could probably Google fidelity.com and literally on that homepage of that particular article, which I guess I could send to Rachel, it has 1 million, funds that you can be a part of if you wanted to do it. But, ultimately it is work. And you are the master here, Kristen, knowing what you know. We can read an article and it seems to oftentimes raise more questions than, it can say, well, this is a good thing, but compared to what? And, and then we're suddenly down all kinds of rabbit holes with, but it does this, but it doesn't do that, or why is it compared to this other one? So I get lost along the way. I mean, I try to wade into the financial comprehension, but it's I am quite limited in understanding.
I have to say, I think with this whole GameStop thing that erupted a couple of weeks ago, it really shone a spotlight on most people's ignorance of the market and the lingo and the inner workings of the financial world, what happened with GameStop. I mean, I saw people joking on Facebook who understood that and who didn't. It's a world that I think a lot of people live on the periphery, and especially a lot of women live on the periphery, and we don't really understand the true meaning and inner workings of it, and yet it affects us so dramatically, and we really want to use our power to make this a better world, and this is a way that we can. I think that Chris has really highlighted that we do have that power. Even if we don't understand it, there are people who can help us to understand it, and we really do have that power.
And it's getting more complicated all the time. I mean, when you add in Bitcoin and all the other pseudo currencies and whatnot, you know, sustainable Bitcoin, I don't think so.
So that's a super interesting thing, right? People ask us, you know, are you in Bitcoin? Are you in Bitcoin? And I said, you know what, we really need to know that our revenues are coming from something that's sustainable and good. And that is so yet to be determined about how this is all going to happen. So I'm open to hearing, and yet there isn't any proof yet for us to be, you know, not that you can't make a lot of money doing that, because, and yet it's so much gambling as opposed to investing when there's that much unknown, you know, and some people are up for that. And sometimes there's a bucket, you know, if you think about all of your different needs for, you know, whether it's food and housing, you know, supporting my children, or, you know, whatever your needs are, sometimes there's a little bit left. And then as long as you know which bucket it's coming from, and you're really excited about it, and you know how much you can afford to lose. But that's where I see Bitcoin right now, because investing for me is, there's more knowns, and there, you know, no investment is guaranteed. Of course, you can always lose money, and yet trying to reduce risk in that way is something we think about a lot. So I have to jump to this other call, and I just want to say thank you to Rachel. It's been so nice to just spend this morning with you, and I'm available for questions or thoughts. I'll of course let you know when our mutual fund comes out, when it gets, you know, to a place where it actually makes sense for people, and happy to share anything else. I write the Money Doula blog, and happy to share that if it's little short pieces on different pieces of our economy, hoping to welcome women in. But at any rate, I'll talk to Rachel. And so share any questions, thoughts. I would love your feedback too. If you could share them with her, she'll be honest with me about what I could do to improve or be more accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was really enlightening.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
No,
Bye.
absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe in that cold.
Yeah.